Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Emily. Great to chat with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this conversation. You've written numerous books on astrology. You're an award-winning astrologer, the founder of the London School of Astrology, and I just feel so honored to have you join us today.
Oh, well, thank you. No, it's a pleasure. I'm delighted we finally found a way to connect. Yeah.
Yeah. I love if you could share your big three, your sun, moon, and rising, and how you got into studying and teaching astrology.
Okay. Well, I'm a sun in Aries, and that's also a sun opposite Uranus. Uh, to give you a little bit more, I'm a moon in Virgo, square Neptune, and I'm a Gemini ascendant, conjunct Saturn. So, yes, that's a bit more than you asked for. New areas, listen to new people, always keep soaking up as much as I can. I'm the eternal student of astrology. And I guess I started at age 16. I went to see an astrologer who uh, told me some very interesting things, and it was an astrologer called Tad Mann, who has been around for a long time, and he was living in London back in 1989 when I went to see him. It was a full moon in August, and I went home and I looked at my chart, looked at the book that I bought from him, and tried to make sense of what those lines were and the symbols were. And it really started from there. And of course, you never learn astrology without other people. But I would say for the first few years, I was self-taught as much as you can be, and simply that I was reading books, looking at charts, getting everything I could. And this is, of course, before the internet and before the ability to uh, this was just on the verge as well of being able to create charts on computer. And one of the first things I did was to get uh, it was called Electric Ephemeris, and it was a computer, uh, had a database. It was a computer program on astrology, and it was great to have that, to be able to print off charts, and they were very beautiful. So very different times, and I was still learning how to construct the chart myself, how to put it together. But it was great when computers came along and just helped us out, I must tell you.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, so you were manually doing charts by hand then.
I was trying not to, but I was learning how to and getting it wrong sometimes. And I had a little computer that had an astrology program attached to it that would give me all the calculations. So it was very interesting, completely different from what students have now. I have students who are particularly in China, who were born in 2003, 2004. And I always joke, that's not a year of birth, that's a year of my life. It's just so, it's so recent. And they do everything on their phones, on their watches, uh, and have access to everything. But I love the idea of printing charts out, writing them up, drawing on them, creating them. You learn astrology beautifully that way as well, step by step.
That makes so much sense. I'm so curious to ask you, and working with so many students, have you found any commonalities in terms of what motivates or inspires one to pursue astrology?
Ah, I think astrology generally caters towards the fire and air type. You know, most of the teachers have a combination of fire and air, and those are the people you see lecture, but it's really the earth and air we need because we're dealing with people on their practical matters every day. So we need to have a level of common sense that earth provides often. And we also need that water connection. So it's very interesting how I grew up with amazing astrologers in London teaching, going to see them lecture, and they um, they were all very fire and air. But really, ultimately, we need water and earth uh, in real practice um, with our clients. But coming back to your question, I think the students over the years have had, I guess, every possible combination. I think a lot of students uh, for one time they were all sort of 1989, 1992, that great triple conjunction of Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Capricorn. I've had a lot of students who were born then. I got into astrology at that time as at a 16-year-old, but I've seen a lot of students, and now it might be the Uranus and Aquarius students born in the early 2000s, the turn of the millennium. Not really seen any connection, but what I do see is that the ones that connect on a one-to-one level as clients, or students who are online and stay the course, really, often have strong connections to my chart. They'll have an ascendant at the same degree as my moon, or one of the big three. There'll be connection. So when I print off their chart, I think, okay, that's why they're here to see me. That's why they're learning from me, even if they don't know it yet. That's why we have a connection, rather than going to another school or seeing another astrologer. So that's what I notice.
Oh,
But
that's
it, yeah,
fascinating. And how fun when you're able to actually, see that connection, and I'm sure feel it as well.
it is. I think the thing about learning astrology is that whatever dislikes you may have, like I'll never date another Cancerian man, woman. I'll never, I'll never marry another moon in Scorpio. All the silly things that we say once we start learning astrology, then you realize not only you may have those in your chart, but you also realize that the people that you admire, the people that you get close to, have those positions. So I think learning astrology encourages you, that's probably the best word for it, encourages you to be, I guess, less um, black or white. It really reminds you that we all have a bit of everything in our charts. The planets are there, the signs are there, even if they're not occupied. We're all made of the same magic, the same dust, the same dirt, however you want to call it. And it should give you more insight to being more tolerant. I'm not suggesting that astrologers are the most tolerant people in the world. I'm certainly not, but it does remind you that we're all born of the same substance.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And what would you say for actually doing the one-on-one work with clients? What have you found to be really great qualities to be able to, you know, connect with people in that way?
I think you need to know how to listen, and you need to know it needs to be less about trying to impress somebody with what you know and what you've learned, which is what we all try to do at the beginning. I started to see clients properly, I think around the age of 21, which I look back and I think, what were you doing? But it was great practice. It was the way to do it. Jump in the deep end, try not to say anything upsetting, offensive, scary, try not to act like the guru who knows everything. These are all, when I teach at the LSA, tell the students all the mistakes I made over the years, in the hope that they won't make them often. We all make them, but so I think listening, understanding that the client may have a very different perception from you as to what a good relationship is. So we're not trying to enforce that. And also we're wanting the horoscope to speak through the client, uh, and vice versa. And we can only do that if we don't enforce particular set meanings onto our clients. So you've got this in your chart. You must have had a difficult relationship with your mother, or you've got a debilitated this or that, and so therefore you probably won't earn much money. All the nonsense things that hopefully people don't say anymore, but they certainly said that when I was learning and growing and seeing astrologers. And so I think, apart from the tolerance, the idea of being engaged in a dialogue, not being the guru with the ego, to allow the client to show you how they live their chart, and that's essential, because trust me, everybody lives their chart differently. Not only because of their experiences, the time in history they're born into, what they choose to do, but also the fact that they're born into a whole set of other people's horoscopes as well and other people's experiences that may or may not bring out who they are. So when you meet somebody and you think, oh, this is what I might expect from their chart, they come along doing something very different. Or you move. At one point, many years ago, I saw in a week, and I was maybe seeing 5 or 6 clients a week. It wasn't many, but many years ago, three people in 2 days, all born on the same day, different times of the day, but same year, same day. And that was interesting to see as a reminder of how different people are. So that's to keep it open. I would say keep an open mind and not try to enforce what you think you know on the person, but meet in the middle and see how they experience it. You'll learn something, they'll learn something as well.
That really speaks to me. And as a twin, I can definitely see how our charts, express in different ways, or how we really live our, our charts in different ways, our soul expression. So, and how very Aries of you to start reading charts at 21.
Yes, well, I was also a palm reader from the age of 17, and I do less of that now. But I think the first gig was in a nightclub called Stringfellows in London. It's a very busy, um, loud nightclub, and they needed a fund. They were doing a fundraising night. They needed somebody to read hands, and They put me on the dance floor. This was before anybody was dancing, under a strobe light. I had no idea that I needed to be able to read a hand or even look at a chart. So I managed to negotiate my way to the bar where I sat and I spoke to people. And one of the people there, I looked at his hand and I said, I knew he was about 34, 35. And I made a prediction, which I wouldn't do nowadays. But back then, I thought, oh, I'm going to predict something. And I mentioned that many years ago, around the age of 21, he'd had a death in the family. Now, I wouldn't say that if that was coming up, of course, but I mentioned that, and he said nothing. And then I said, how old are you? He said, 34. And I said, well, your hand suggests that in about a year, within a year, you'll finish a business partnership and strike out on your own. And he said goodbye and he left. And as he left, he said, my brother drowned when I was 21. And then he contacted me about 8 months later and said, the business partner ran away with my money and and I started up my own business, come and see me. And he started sending me clients.
Wow.
So had I been a little bit more careful, I wouldn't have predicted something, and I'd have been a little bit more careful as I would be now. But it opened the door, and that's how I started to see clients, all from that crazy one night under a strobe light, trying to trying to read hands in a club. So.
Wow, what a fun story. It also speaks to the level of trust, that needs to be cultivated or honed over time. Yeah, I love that. So, we're going to do something really fun today. I'm so excited. This is a part of our new blueprint series, which really helps people to understand their divine blueprint through different modalities such as astrology, human design, gene keys. And I can't think of a better person than you, Frank, to really kick us off and get us started. And one of the most common questions that is asked is around soul purpose and around how we can take the natal chart and look at some of our gifts, maybe look at some of the areas that we're meant to thrive in our life and our purpose. And so I'd love to just dive in there and say, ask you, where are some of the key placements that you look at first when answering this question?
Okay, all right. Well, there are a few of them. I would look at the sun in the chart, which I think is fundamental to life purpose. I look at the moon as well, and I'll say more about these in a moment. But the moon, I always say, follow your sun and don't forget to feed your moon, because the moon is what you need day to day. It's often downplayed as some sort of um, reactive mood symbol in the chart in some way, but it's so important. comfortable as well, to be comfortable. So the moon, and then I also look at the midheaven, the MC in the chart, in terms of how we might flower in society, how we might take our talents shown in the rest of the chart and channel them through the MC sign. So those three things. I know a lot of people look at the nodes as well, so I'll mention something about those in a minute. What's your experience?
Yes, I would look at all the sun, the moon, the midheaven, and the nodes. And then, also wanted to ask you about the houses, right? So we hear about, the traditional career houses, a second house, maybe to look, well, the second house, the sixth house, the 10th house. What would you recommend there?
I would look at those two. I would look at the second house for a lot about how you initially can make your money, very simply, how you feed yourself financially, in a sense. The sixth house has a lot to do with the processes of work, getting your routine right, getting your energy levels right, in the sense of, I mean, the sun is really the holistic health, but the sixth house is about getting the system right so your health doesn't interfere with your daily work and your daily life. So the sixth house is more the house of uh, illness, if you need to be aware of it. Otherwise, when it's running well, we're just busy doing our daily sixth house grind. Yeah.
Mm.
And the 10th house is more to do with the boss, the company, your long-term aims. So I'd look at all those three, but the the energy of the chart is really found in the sun in terms of the calling, the vocation. And it's not so much career, because a lot of people have to earn a living and don't end up earning money from what they love to do. Or they're an accountant, but secretly they're an astrologer on the side. I haven't met many of those, but there are. Or they're a musician, they're an astrologer, or maybe they do some sort of regular work, which isn't astrology, but and then maybe they're secretly a musician, and that's their calling, that's their vocation. So um, I would look at those, but the sun is key. And if you can describe the sun well to other people, if you can really describe it uh, effectively in a consultation to a client, they'll recognize that. It's that spark that they have inside them, that quality that says, I'm being heard, I'm being seen. And if you can do a little bit of your sun, you feel alive, you feel like you're contributing, you're creating in a way. And I think a lot of people don't get a chance to do that, or they put other people's um, priorities before their own sometimes. Say to students, follow your sun sign, do things linked to that sun sign. You'll feel alive, you'll feel engaged in life, you'll feel creative. Otherwise, you can sit and wallow in the worst of the opposite sign. So you get a sun in Pisces who was born to be a poet or a musician, or in some way to connect to the higher self, to connect to something that is beyond the meat and potatoes of life. And so Pisces, that journey is one of some sort of spiritual creative connection for the whole. But you meet a lot of Pisces who become obsessed or stay in the worst of Virgo, what I say, wallowing in the worst of Virgo. And that might be that they're obsessed with health, dirt, getting ill, daily functions, and anxieties over things they can't control. And so you often meet people who are, or seem to epitomize the I wouldn't say the worst side, because I'm not judging on that, but certainly the least creative side of what their sun could be. And it seems to be found in the opposite sign. So, if you're an Aries, be an Aries. Don't be compromising all the time, the worst of Libra, or being in the passenger seat in your own car, which is the worst of what Libra could be, apologizing for being alive or blaming everybody else for not having done what you need to do. Be an Aries. If you're a Libra, be a Libra. Go out into the world and fight for injustice, fight against injustice, shall I say. Don't be sitting around trying to just create conflict and dividing and ruling, which is the worst of Aries. So we all have this potential here to really follow our sun, but a lot of times we can sit in a more comfortable, more passive place in the opposite sign.
That's so interesting. I love how you bring up the axes and really maybe this way of integrating, this way of really attuning to, what it is that your soul wants to express in this lifetime.
And
And
I don't think anything is wrong. I don't think, but you see unhappy Pisces because they're focusing on the least conducive side of Virgo, the least creative side of Virgo. Pisces is like the artist. I'll paint whatever I feel like today. The inner critic, which is the opposite of the Virgo, says, oh no, you need to get a real job. You need to do this. You're not good enough. You should be doing this. And shoulda, coulda, woulda, all of those things. And I meet um, clients who are wallowing in the worst. And when you describe the best, they recognize it. They hear it. They know it. They put it to one side. They put it in a drawer. They've given it up for marriage or children or work or to deal with a sick relative. And it's almost like astrology, without sounding patronizing, can give people permission as a reminder to be who they were born to be. And the sun really represents that in the chart. So when we describe it well, not just the sign, but the major aspects it makes, etc., we really help people connect to that profound essence of why they're here. And it's a very self-centered essence, because we can try to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, but nobody knows what it's like to live and breathe in our bodies, in our minds, from our eyes. And astrology has a great way of helping us at least connect to that. We may not completely understand what somebody goes through, but we can at least say to them, I can see it. The chart suggests that, and give people often doorways into new experiences or getting back to something they may have long forgotten.
yes, I love that so much. And when you're speaking of the sun, what I'm feeling as you're sharing is giving people permission to really shine in the way that they came here to do. And I love how you talk about the sun and, the placement. So I'd love if you could just share a couple examples to really bring that to life.
Okay. All right. So, for example, let's think of Taurus and Scorpio. Okay. Do you share your sun, moon, ascendant with people? Do you?
I do, yes. I'm a Virgo sun, Virgo rising, and Pisces moon.
Okay. Okay. So you live with that polarity that we were mentioning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can have a look at Taurus and Scorpio. And if we go from the other perspective of Pisces and Virgo, for example, with you, um, Virgo is born to be the craftsperson. They're born to really get to the heart of the matter, find the essence, make it useful. And they, Virgo is often, it's people talk about it being the sign after Leo that makes a lot of noise. Virgo ends up, I always think of Virgo as like the quiet ruler of the zodiac. They just do it very quietly without the fanfare. They don't need to say, look at me, I'm in charge. They'll just attend to the things that are absolutely important, primary, and useful. So in a way, when we're looking at the sun in Virgo, we want to understand all of their worthiness in life, and not and with that comes having some sort of order, having a system, having something that keeps them going. Being organized is super important for Virgo. What you find sometimes is that people with sun in Virgo may wallow in the so-called worst of Pisces, which is a bit of chaos, not having a schedule, not knowing what day of the week it is, letting people down, being unreliable. When in fact, the journey for Virgo is about showing up, doing a great job, aiming towards perfection, even if that may not be a realistic aim ultimately or complete perfection. But you do meet some Virgos who are sort of hoping and wishing and dreaming instead of learning how to do it hands on.
Mhm.
So the journey of Virgo is to know how to do everything in the office and then delegate it so they can then focus on the essentials, for instance. But you do find a lot of unhappy Virgos who are hoping they might win the lottery, or somebody will take me away from this, or they're doing that sort of Pisces longing. Now, every sign opposition can learn a lot from each other. Virgo needs to let go. It's very controlling as a sign, extremely controlling. I just think Virgos have edited that out of all the books. But Virgo is the big controlling sign, along with Scorpio and Capricorn, of course. But so sometimes Pisces can come in and say, go with the flow, see where it takes you. Don't worry. Don't worry about how much you get done today. Just soak it up, see what other people are doing. Learn from life in that way. So we can always learn from the opposite sign, but our journey as a solar journey with the sun in that sign is about the craft, is about learning something that really makes maybe a small thing, but it makes a big difference. And that's part of the invitation for Virgo, I think. Yeah.
I love that. What about Scorpio? You said you were going to touch on Scorpio.
Well, well, Taurus and Scorpio, we think of Taurus, it's fixed Earth, so it's steady. It's given a bit of a boring reputation when you read about it, but Taurus is also a very sensual sign. It's playful, it's fun, it knows how to enjoy life, it can teach people how to enjoy life. So the journey of Taurus is really about building something of substance that other people and themselves can rely on. So Aries lights the fire, starts it. Taurus then builds on it to make sure it doesn't peter out, it doesn't get extinguished, and to really connect with the earth, to connect with the, I guess, the natural life as well. Yeah. Now, often you find Scorpio gets upset. Sorry, Taurus, when it sits in that Scorpio polarity, will become obsessed with emotional crises, dramas, going on from one thing to the next. So you'll often, instead of Taurus being the calm center for everybody, it's one, well, I'm not talking to them, I'm stalking them, they're stalking me. And I'm not making fun of any of that, but it can be drama. The worst of Scorpio. I'm never letting go of this, or I'm obsessed with that, and look what they did to me. And you see that in the other way around. The best of Scorpio is the alchemist, the magician, the ability to take lead and make it gold. And Scorpio's got a tremendous strength and resilience to be reborn. Scorpio can be in a situation where there's crisis, everything gets destroyed, and it rebuilds. It starts again. It sheds its skin. It begins again. It rises from the ashes, to use some of those images. And it's got a nose for trust, a nose for the deal, a nose to connect with people. It's got a very good sense. When Scorpio is sitting in the Taurus polarity, it gets obsessed with money. It gets obsessed with the simple things of life, actually, that don't mean much, right? Scorpio, all the water signs, Scorpio, Pisces, Cancer, all know that the most important things in life are the things you can't hold. It's not what's in your bank account or how much money you've got under the bed. It's not what you leave behind physically for anybody. It's how you make people feel. The water signs know that. But Scorpio, you see, sometimes they become the bankers, they become the accountants, where it's all about the control of the money. And it's sort of sitting in the Taurus realm, when Scorpio is actually about the magic of emotional creativity with somebody, to really bond with somebody where you go to depths that you've never been before, of trust and intimacy, etc. But sometimes Scorpio just sits there in the worst of Taurus, and says, when I get $1 million this year, or I'm going to aim for this, and they sort of miss the point of being a Scorpio, which is about emotional transformation and power. So this is what you often see with that. People sit in the opposite. And I think our job, possibly, if clients want it, is to just remind them, to show them the other side, that will be very aware of already.
I love this. For me, this is about really bringing in a higher octave and understanding, the notes that we're playing. And so I love that. I want to ask you about the nodes and the midheaven because you mentioned that. How would you interpret that? How would you bring that into understanding one's gifts and how they're desiring to?
Well, one of the first things about the midheaven is that it's a window on the world. It's not a planetary energy. It will have a sign position. Maybe you'll have planets aspecting it. But I always think of the midheaven as a prism. It's sort of shine the light of the chart through it. So you might have, for example, a Cancer sun in Cancer, but Aquarius midheaven. And they seem very incompatible according to what we know about the elements and the modes. But nothing is incompatible. Everything's got possibility. Everything's got a link. Everything's got something in common or something we can learn from the other sign. So the sun in Cancer, the focus, the the key journey of the sun in Cancer is in some way to find an emotional tribe of some kind, a group of people that you can build with. It might be a family at work. It might be a family of friends. It might be your own family. It might be about knowing about your ancestors. Cancer's about that emotional taproot into the soil, into the past. Now, if you've got an Aquarius midheaven, it feels like a very different energy. Aquarius is quite sociable, chatty. It's fixed air, so it's opinionated. It's different. It feels different from the rest of the world. But together, you'll think about how do I shine that through? And what I found is that that sun principle, however different it may be from the midheaven sign, there are ways forward. And Aquarius is about finding the different group that understands your differentness, understands that you've got a different take on the world. You've got a perspective outside of the box. And I had a client a few years ago who sat down and I was talking to her about having the sun in Cancer and Aquarius midheaven. And I was trying to think of some ideas as we do of ways. And she said, let me interrupt you. She said, I created a network of people and we do street food. And back then, it wasn't, I mean, it was just coming up in London where there'd be a whole community of people that would gather together at weekends along the embankment of London, just by the River Thames. And there might be 15 different types of authentic cuisine from different parts of the world.
How important is it to look at the degree of the midheaven?
Well, only in the sense of what else does it aspect within 6 to 8 degrees, maybe. But also, I like looking at the decans, the first 10 degrees, the second, and the third. And they give you a quality a little bit more. They just give you more information. So you might have an Aries midheaven. The first 10 degrees would be complete Aries. The next 10 degrees has a tint of the next fire sign on from Aries. So it would be like a Leo quality. And then the final 10 degrees has a Sagittarian quality. And so you can look at those in decans to just get a different feel. A bit like your sun sign. The first 10 degrees or 10 days of your sun sign are pure of that sun sign. The next 10 days is the next sign in the same element. So if you're Taurus, the second decan would be Taurus Virgo, and the third decan would be Taurus Capricorn. If you're Virgo, it'd be pure Virgo. The next one would be Virgo Capricorn, the next one in the sequence, and the third would be Virgo Taurus. So I'm not sure if
I
people
love
can.
that you're bringing this through for listeners, and of course, they'll want to have their charts handy and nearby, but this can be a really fun thing to look at in your chart to get, additional flavor. So,
I've written a lot on the Midheaven. I wrote a book called Midheaven Spotlight on Success. And it's just a little book, but it was looking at all the signs, all the planets involved. And it just came from years. It's a small book. I didn't want to spend years writing a book when the Aries in me said, just get it done quickly, just get it out there. And my key was it's astrology at its best, I think, is about observation, looking at how people do it. And they may not always do it perfectly well, but we learn from the motivation, the energy of people. And that's what the chart reveals. Yeah. So the
Yeah.
midheaven to me is I love that point. I love that area of the chart because it's sort of like blossoming. It's like a tree that is starting to bear fruit. Yeah.
Yes, that's a great way of describing it. So, would you look at the ruler of that sign as well to get an additional flavor?
You could do, yes. Often the information is there already. You don't have to look far. I like the ruler of the ascendant, the chart ruler gives you a lot of information, more about sort of the person themselves and how they operate, or the motivation behind how we come across. Often is in the signs and the planetary placements as well. Yeah.
I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I wanted to ask you about Saturn.
Hmm. In
Do
what
you look,
way?
well, I feel like Saturn really keeps us on track. And, when we're talking about purpose, it's like just this energy that really allows us to, throughout the course of our lives, attend to an area and a landscape that we're meant to grow into.
Well, often Saturn, the position of Saturn often speaks of our greatest fear, but it's also the area if we face that fear, we end up being a master of that area. So that's a classic, I guess, interpretation of what Saturn may be. So often it's the one area that we feel intimidated by or insecure about. And yet, if we keep chipping away over time, which is a Saturn concept, of course, over time we end up feeling more more of a master in that way. But yes, Saturn, the principles of commitment, responsibility, not blaming everybody else for the choices you make. These are all principles that connect to maturity, but also to doing well in your chosen vocation. That sense that uh, I can deliver. I can say what I'm going to do. I'll be there on time. I'm committed to it. These are all Saturn principles. And my feeling is that Saturn, I love Saturn transits. I love looking at Saturn and exploring it because it's the one area where you know that if you put more attention into it, it pays off. It may not always give you everything that you wanted, but it gives you what you need and it gives you enough. What they say, you may not get what you pay for with Saturn, but you pay for everything that you get. So you really earn it with Saturn.
Hmm.
That can be the key. And the other thing is that if you don't do your Saturn, there are 1,000,001 other people in the world ready to do it for you. Meaning there'll be somebody that will give you a ticket on your car. There'll be somebody to fine you because you haven't delivered your taxes on time. We live in a very Saturn world where if we don't own our Saturns, there's somebody, believe me, with a job title, a very long job title, ready to be Saturn for us. So if we don't obey the law in some way, we meet a judge who becomes Saturn for us, or we do time in prison, etc. So it's the principle of karma, really.
Yeah, that's such a great way.
That idea of cause and effect. What we put in, we get out. So it's a powerful planet to consider. And of course, it's connected to Saturn, sorry, a Capricorn and the 10th house. So it has a link to vocation, but it really has a link to responsibility, which of course people now say is, we play around with those words. Responsibility is the ability to respond. And that's the key to Saturn. Do we have an ability to respond in an ethical, adult way? Um, I love it. I was reading something about Dolly Parton recently, the singer-songwriter who I adore. And somebody said to her, when you were heavier, uh, did you eat because you were abused as a child, or do you? And she said, I don't overeat because I was slapped when I was 5 years old. She said, I'm overeat because I'm a greedy hog, or something like that. She said it in a funny way, as only she could. And in a way, we're all a product of our parents. We're a product of their belief system, their needs, their desires, their unfulfilled vocational desires or emotional desires. And yet there comes a point, usually around the Saturn return at 29, where we have to say, yes, they screwed up, but most of them did what they knew how to do, and when they knew better, they did better. And when we understand that, we sort of take the burden off them to be perfect and for us to blame them for what they did or didn't do. And that's a big transformation. And then we become a little bit more responsible, a little bit more adult, I think.
Yeah, I love that you brought Dolly Parton through. I love her, and she has such a powerful 10th house, as I recall looking at her chart. I can't remember what planets she has, but
Well, she's a Virgo rising,
yeah.
like you, the moon in Virgo, and she's, I think, Uranus on the midheaven in
Okay.
Gemini. So she's famous for her words. She's very witty. You know, the Uranus midheaven in Gemini is that ability to, when I did a lot of research and wrote about the astrology of comedy and
Yeah,
humor,
and musicians, right?
and musicians as well. Yes, that was a
Yeah.
different. But with with humor, uh, Uranus is the key to humor because we turn things upside down. Saturn is as well in its own way, where we're poking fun at society and people, but Uranus is the key. And uh, I'm not surprised she has a strong Uranus because I mean, she's not only hilariously funny and inventive and brilliant and constantly creative, but also I don't know any other celebrity that would enter a Dolly Parton lookalike contest and come third.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you about that, right? Because we talked a little bit about those houses, right? The second, the sixth, and the 10th as indicators. And, perhaps somebody's listening and they're going, well, I don't have any planets in those houses. And so what would that mean and what would you look at if that's the case?
Well, there are 10 planets some people use. Some people just use seven. Some people use a lot more points in the chart. But if we're looking at the Sun to Pluto, we've got 10 bodies that we look at in the chart. And of course, there are 12 houses. So you're not going to get a house that has something in it unless you use a lot more points in the chart, different asteroids or etc., which of course is totally your choice. What I would say to beginners generally is don't put too much in the chart, just stick with the sun all the way out to Pluto, those 10 points. Stick the nodes in, which we'll talk about in a minute. Stick Chiron in if you've got somebody that's teaching you about Chiron, but keep it simple. You can always add things later. And so if you have empty houses, it doesn't mean that you don't have any activity in that area of life, because every house is linked to a particular planet naturally. So the sixth house, because it's linked to Virgo, is linked to Mercury. We all have a Mercury that can do sixth house sort of stuff. Venus is linked to the second house, as is Taurus. We all have Taurus somewhere. We all have Venus somewhere. So there's always information about how we might make money or value ourselves, or second house ways into the chart. I often say that we astrologers have maybe 500 different ways of describing 50 key points of human nature. So it doesn't really matter. This is why sometimes people think, um, I've seen this before when people they think they must have Virgo rising. And in fact, they've got Saturn strong in the chart, because what they're connecting to is that ability to organize, maybe that ability to be alone or to be self-contained in some way, which both the planet Saturn and the sign Virgo share. So sometimes you can get different ways of
Hmm.
connecting, seeing the same traits in different ways, like Virgo and Saturn. You may not have one, but you may have the other. So lots of ways of getting to the essence of the chart, or getting to the heart of the chart, as I would say. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. So what if you don't have any planets in a house, but your north node is there?
Okay, well, the nodes are interesting because over the years I tried to ignore the nodes. I tried to, because there was so much. Um, I wouldn't spiritual, yes, but sometimes karmic association attached to the nodes, which absolutely is your right to attach anything to any, to any meaning to the chart. But I step back a bit because I thought, if you don't want to share that, if you don't believe in soul purpose, if you don't believe in karma, if you don't believe in past lives, what do they mean? There must be other meanings too. So I would find myself, and I still do, I teach all the different meanings of the nodes to the students because I'm not wanting to enforce a belief system. I happen to believe in past lives. I happen to feel that they exist. And when you listen to people who have regressed, etc., there are some amazing stories out there. But I don't think the chart has to come with a particular belief system. It's astrology is so remarkable that if you all you ever knew were the stock markets and the Dow Jones and the Nikkei Dow, you could use astrology to see your world through those economic or financial terms. It doesn't matter. Or if you love weather forecasting, astrology will help you with that. Or synastry, relationship astrology. So the nodes to me, they come as a pair, just like the ascendant, descendant, the midheaven and the IC, even the sun and moon. And thinking that we have to go from one to the other or leave one behind about these. But the South Node, according to Brian, is the great gift. It's like the library of what we've understood in past lives or not. But it's something that we know very well that we can draw upon. That's the South Node. It's not some ugly, awful, back end of a dragon, as we're led to believe that it's something to expel, to get rid of. Actually, it's like a fountain or a library of knowledge. The North Node is the invitation. This is what Brian Clark calls it, the invitation to try something from a different angle. Now, we know signs that are opposite have a lot in common. The Aries Libra polarity is about me and you and the balance of me and us and I and we. And Taurus and Scorpio are about stability, but also resources and strength and principles from a different perspective, from a financial one, an earthy one, and also from an emotional one. So the nodes remind us that we can always learn to expand our gifts, to take our gifts and try something new. So the North Node to me is the invitation to do something that may be quite foreign to the nature. It may not be. You might have the North Node and your moon in the same sign. So the moon is already accessing that quality. But the North Node to me is the invitation to expand your consciousness while not leaving the South Node in the shade or in the past. So it's about working with both of them. It's a bit like your MC and your IC. You can head off to your MC, but don't forget where you've come from. You need to know in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you've come from. There's that real sense of that with the nodes as well. In order to really make something fruitful, you've got to have resources. You've got to be able to tap into innate talents, and then you can take up the challenge. So having the node in any house, if it's unoccupied and you've just got the node there, one of the nodes, is an invitation to explore that gift, if it's the South Node, or to take up a challenge that could take you somewhere new that would expand your consciousness. Now, I would ignore nodes, as I said, for a long time because of this. It's a bit like Chiron. Every time I went to a lecture and people would mention Chiron, it was their wound and they were holding on to it. And it was like, well, I'm Moon Chiron. This is what my mother did to me. And I thought, if that's your script, you're not going to be able to tear that up. Well, that's my feeling about that, with respect to their wound, of course. So where was I going with that? So yes, I was cautious about adding Chiron, adding the nodes on initially because of it seemed to come with so much baggage and so much inference of what it really means. And what I discovered is that when I was looking at synastry, the compatibility, so-called compatibility between people's charts, the nodes were like magnets. They would attract people into your life. So you'd find that maybe your nodes would either conjunct or opposite, either conjunct or oppose maybe somebody's Venus or somebody's Sun. And this is why you found them in a field of 8 billion people. Yeah? And vice versa. There would be nodal connections between the two charts very powerfully. So I couldn't ignore them anymore. And it was my way in and realized that the nodes are a bit like magnets that connect. It's a bit like you take a magnet and you've got lots of different filings, and you've got lots, some of it may be iron filing, some of it may be wood, and all of a sudden the magnet will be attracted to one set of filings on the desk. And
Mm,
that's what we do. Our nodes tend to just sort of hunt, and then all of a sudden there's a connection with somebody else's chart, and we feel it. Whether it's past life, I don't know, but it's this life. And I always say to people, I don't know about past lives. I haven't learned about them yet, but I do know that if your chart is your birth chart, then it's for you to use this lifetime rather than be worried or blame or feel
mm,
condemned to be repeating things. But these are different opinions and different belief systems, and I'm always curious to learn people's approaches and stuff as well. So
I love the term magnets, and that brings up this whole new energy to explore. And I'd love to have you back on the show sometime to talk about synastry. And gosh, there's so many topics that I would love to explore with you, Frank. But this has been such an incredible conversation. You've given us just a wealth of information to discover and to, help us to better understand our own blueprint. So thank you though so much.
thank you for the invite and good luck with it all. It sounds like a great project. So I'm very happy to be an Aries, to be the first, or at least one of the first in it. So thank you.
Yes, please share with listeners where they can go to learn more about you, your books, the London School of Astrology.
Oh, thank you. Well, you can go to londonschoolastrastrology.com, have a look. There's a lot of free stuff online, a lot of my articles on there. If you sign up for the free interpretation sessions, I'm always doing something. I'm always somewhere teaching. I love teaching. I love connecting. I used to love doing it in person. Now we all tend to have to do it online. So sometimes it feels like you're speaking into a black hole somewhere, but it's great to have interaction. And yes, I love teaching, and if people respond to whatever I'm saying, feel very welcome to sign up to the freebies and learn more.
Oh, yes. Well, we will absolutely link to all of that in the show notes. And your school, can people take courses, or is it entire curriculum? How does that work?
It's very flexible. You can take a single course, you can take a one-off day, a Saturday. We're doing a series at the moment called Astro Detective, where I'm tackling things that students don't often get a lot of detail on. For example, retrogrades in the natal chart. We're doing that soon. And what did I do the other day? I did the chart ruler, and with Melanie Reinhardt together, we did the lunation cycle in the natal chart as well. So yeah, if I set something like that, I've got a couple of weeks to teach myself more. So it's a good, if I sign up to teach something I don't know a huge amount about, it means I've got an excuse to study it and to learn more and then to share it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, I love learning from you. I love listening to you. You are incredible, Frank. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your gifts and your heart and your knowledge.
Thank you as well, Emily.